Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to watch this ELS webinar series. We're super excited to be talking all about ELS's university admissions services and different metrics for you to consider when you're choosing the university program that you wish to attend in the future. My name is Mackenzie Kirby, and I'm the Director of Global Higher Education Recruitment. And today I have with me the expert on all things university admissions, Miss Laura Squire, who is the Director of Higher Education Admissions. Can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and how long you've worked for ELS?
Yeah, and first, welcome everybody. We're so glad to have you here joining us today. As Mackenzie mentioned, my name is Laura Squire, and I've been with ELS for about 10 years now, working in our University Admission Services Department. So working, directly with our students and agent partners who are helping their students with their university choices, and also working with our university partners as well to share their programs and help make the admission process smooth. So we're excited to share some of these kind of tips and tricks as we talk with you today.
Yeah, and as Laura mentioned, she's been here for a long time, which means there have been thousands and thousands of applications that have been processed. So if you want to, feel free to include any questions in the chat. And if we can't answer them during the live stream, we will go back into the comments and answer them there. She also mentioned that she's worked both with students and agents as well. And so I just wanted to address that really quickly. If you do not already have an agent, we highly suggest that you reach out to your local agent because they're really experts in helping you through that application process. But if you're considering studying higher education in the United States, you are in the right place. Today, we're going to talk about the different metrics for you to consider beyond just ranking. Everyone always talks about ranking, but we want to talk about a couple of other things that you might want to consider. And before we get started with that, I am going to share a little bit about ELS's university admission services, as well as the ELS language programs and the levels, so that you can understand the correlation between ELS and higher education. So ELS University Admission Services has over 650 different university and college partners across the United States and across Canada, which means you have many options that you can choose from. And that also means that over 650 different universities and colleges have approved the ELS curriculum and really agreed that it is a strong preparation of academics, so that you know that when you go to university that you are going to be prepared. Now, also, one of the services that we offer is conditional acceptance letters or conditional letters of acceptance. And the ELS University Admissions Services will help you via your agent that you're working with locally secure a conditional letter of acceptance to some of our select university partners. This means that before you step foot in the United States or in Canada, you will have a full study plan, including both your language and your university studies. Now, of course, the University Admission Services helps to process that application. So when you're working with an agent, you can just let him or her know which universities you're interested in working with, and we can go ahead and help you process that application. And because ELS has been doing this for 60 years at this point and thousands of applications, we have a very smooth process and a lot of relationship with the universities to get those processed very quickly. And then lastly, of course, this means it's going to be a smooth transition for you. So you come here, you study your English, and you can smoothly transition into your university career without any hiccups or worries post-arrival. Now, if you're curious about the ELS levels and what that has to do with conditional acceptance letters, I've included a little chart here to kind of explain. ELS has 12 levels in 4 what we call proficiency bands. So we have the beginner levels, 101 to 103, intermediate, 104 to 106, advanced levels, 107 to 109, and then the master's levels, 110 to 112. Now, the vast majority of our partners accept ELS level 112 as the proficiency for English. This means no TOEFL, no IELTS, no Duolingo. You can use your ELS certificate as your English proficiency during your application process. Some of our universities, typically community colleges, will accept a level 109. And this would be for more of an associate degree if that is something that you're curious about. Now, the 112 works for undergraduate and a lot of the graduate programs as well. So it gives you so many different options when you're looking to transition to your higher education studies. But that's just a little basic overview of the ELS levels and what university admissions offers. But we're going to get into the 4 things beyond ranking for you to consider when choosing your university partner. The first we would say is really to think about the type of school. The second is cost and financial aid. The third would be the campus size. And the fourth would be the surrounding area. And I'm going to let the expert here talk about all of these things, starting with the type of school. So Laura, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Mackenzie. Yeah, so the goal of talking through these options is to really help you identify the best fit for you and for your family and your circumstances. So as Mackenzie mentioned, the first kind of category that you can consider is the type of school. So in the United States, there's kind of a few different profiles of higher education institutions. So one distinction is public versus private universities. So public are, state linked institutions. So in the different, they're public institutions and supported by state, local governments. So those tend to be larger institutions. Their cost tends to be a little bit less. And they also tend to be more focused on research as opposed to liberal arts. Private colleges, as the name implies, are private, not supported in any way by government funding, and rely mainly on tuition dollars to support those institutions. And those tend to be smaller schools, liberal arts schools, so focus more on the arts versus larger research programs. So though that's a little bit fluid, both types of institutions can offer both, but those tend to be smaller and tend to maybe have a little more of a personalized experience. The next kind of range you consider is 4-year versus 2-year colleges. So a 4-year university is where you can obtain a bachelor's degree or, likely even a higher degree like a master's degree or doctoral degree. 2-year colleges offer associate degrees, which are standalone 2-year degrees that tend to be focused more in vocational areas, or those also could be 2-year transfer degrees. So you might do an associate degree or a 2-year program at one of these smaller community colleges, they're frequently called, and then transfer in to a 4-year degree to obtain your bachelor's degree. And the final category are liberal arts versus research institutions. And I talked about that a little bit when I mentioned public versus private colleges. But the liberal arts, focus more on the humanities, English, history, those types of fields, where research universities tend to be stronger maybe in the sciences and engineering. And those faculty members tend to have research projects, which is great. So that's an area of focus for them. And that sometimes can be a great opportunity for even undergraduate students to participate in research projects, at an earlier stage in their academic career. Whereas the liberal arts schools tend to focus more on teaching as opposed to research. But both can be strong in both areas, but are things to consider depending on, what might be most important to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I also think that part of this is really taking some time to envision what you want your college experience to look like. So for example, and we'll talk about this in a minute, if you really want to have that personal connection with your professor, you might choose one type of college over the other. And you also mentioned community colleges as an option to go into the 4-year degree. I think oftentimes students and agents might think of the ideal 4-year program, but a community college is essentially can be a 4-year program, a 2+2 model, and they typically have really clear study plans as well to get you to that bachelor's degree with all of the different programs that they feed into as well. So community colleges are a really great option for many students for many reasons.
And moving on to our second category, cost and financial aid. So obviously cost is a big factor, and that's something students and their families need to consider, when they're deciding what might be the best fit to meet their educational goals. And as an international student, when you're applying for university, you will need a document I-20 in order to obtain your student visa. And for schools to be able to issue that document I-20, they'll need to see proof of funding. So that's a bank statement from you or your parents, perhaps, that show you have sufficient funds to cover the cost of your study and living expenses while that you're in the United States. So, cost is a factor for you to be able to support yourself, and also as part of the admission process. So when you're considering, cost, of course, you have to look at the tuition of the college itself, as well as the living expenses of the area where you'll be. You should be aware that, a lot of institutions do offer scholarships for international students. So that's something that you should look into. If, at first glance, it seems like an institution might be out of your budget, it's always good to look at what scholarship or work opportunities are there. And that's something your agent or we would be happy to help you confirm if you have interest in any of our partner schools. One thing I wanted to mention about cost, and Mackenzie referenced this as well in our last conversation here, is that community colleges are a good option for maybe more cost-sensitive families, because they tend to be a lower cost. And even if you are interested in pursuing that 4 years bachelor degree, you can complete your initial 2 years of your bachelor's degree program at a lower cost community college, and then transfer to a 4-year university to complete your final degree. And so that's always a good strategy. Again, if you're for financial reasons, and also a great strategy in general. Sometimes that's a pathway into a kind of higher ranked or more well-known 4-year university, transferring in your 3rd year, as opposed to beginning as a 1st-year student.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad that you said that, because that's also very traditional for Americans to do, to start at a community college and then go to, for example, like you said, a higher ranked 4-year university to finish off their degree, that maybe at that time when they were first applying as freshmen, maybe they would not have been qualified for that higher ranking program. But having started in that community college, which was both cheaper and prepared them for that 4-year degree, they were able to then transfer. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that. And just to mention, we have several 2-year community college partners that would be worth looking into: De Anza College, Foothill College, Diablo Valley College, Seattle Central College. Those are all schools that would be great to look into for both financial and, your long-term academic. And then sometimes the public state-run institutions tend to be on the lower cost side as well. So for families that are looking for options like that, Middle Tennessee State University would be an option to look into. Eastern Kentucky University. Those are, public institutions with great programs that have lower tuition rates. Perfect. And so keeping that in mind and moving on to the next metric, one thing that you would want to consider is also the campus size. I remember sitting in on a college counseling session once at one of the ELS centers, and the teacher said to the students, I want you to all close your eyes, and I want you to imagine what you have always thought your college experience is going to be like. Are you in a big lecture hall? Are you in a small classroom? Are there lots of students around? Are there just a couple of you? And it was something that really helps them to consider campus size as a metric for deciding on what program they would want to go into. So Laura, can you tell us a little bit more about why that would be important? Right. So as Mackenzie referenced already, kind of what do you need to succeed? Are you someone that thrives on lots of opportunity, lots of movement, the opportunity to form connections with lots of other students?
Or do you need, more personalized? You feel more comfortable in a smaller circle where you're going to be able to form personalized connections with your professors as opposed to maybe teaching assistants. So it really depends on what would be the best fit for each individual. And we have a gamut of sizes amongst our partners. To give you a sense, Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas is a large research institution with many degrees and programs, and they have over 35,000 students on their campus. So if you can imagine, the campus itself is huge, and of course the student body is very large. And another one of our partners on the opposite end of the spectrum, California Lutheran University in Thousand Oaks, California, has about 4,000 students. So that's obviously a smaller, more personalized experience. So both options are great depending on what you need. So as Mackenzie mentioned, it's really great to think and reflect about what would be the best fit and lead you to success in your higher education studies.
And our fourth metric for something for you to consider is the surrounding area. And Laura's going to talk about this in a second, but one of the things that international students often don't have a lot of opportunity to do is visit their university before they get here. So American students can go and visit multiple universities and then make a decision. Oftentimes for international students, that's a little bit more difficult. So really thinking about what the surrounding area would be and what you're hoping for is going to be really important in your decision process.
Right. And some things you want to consider. Are you looking for a more city or urban experience? Do you want to live in a larger area with lots of movement and activity? Do you want a smaller, a calmer experience, maybe in a rural area or a suburban town? You can also think about the cost of living of where you'll be, because you have to think about your tuition costs, but also what, it will require for your living expenses while you're there. So universities located in larger cities, the cost of living tends to be higher, or, located on either the East or West Coast tend to be a little bit higher, whereas universities and colleges located in more rural areas or maybe in the central part of the country might have lower costs of living that might be important to you. The other thing you want to consider is transportation options. Are there, lots of public transportation, bus, subway, et cetera, that would help you get around while you're there? Or are you interested in getting your driver's license and perhaps having a car and driving yourself around? If that's the case, then public transportation would probably be less important to you. And then you might want, a city where it's easily drivable. And then another option or category that you might want to consider is, what's the student life like? Are there lots of clubs and organizations, sports, lots of activities that you could get involved in on campus as a chance to meet and interact with your other students? Or maybe that's less important to you. Maybe your goal is really to focus on your studies, and those types of things, are not the biggest priority for you. So lots of factors to consider beyond just, the institution itself.
Mm-hmm. And just to go back to community colleges again, this is another reason why a community college might be a really good choice, because you're only committing to 2 years of being in a certain location. And during those 2 years, you can figure out where your final 2 years are going to be. And if you want to stay in that same sort of city or suburb or rural area, or if you'd rather change and go to a different sort of institution. So, of course, I mentioned earlier that we have over 650 different university and college partners. Laura mentioned several of the university partners that we have as well. Here's just a sampling of some of them. If you're interested, University of St. Thomas, University of Laverne, IUPUI, California Lutheran, Florida Tech, Marquette, University of Cincinnati, Oklahoma City University, Case Western, and UMSL. There's so many more, about 640 more for you to choose from. But this is one of the reasons why we highly suggest that you work with an agent who is really familiar with the ELS network of universities for you to get connected to. And to, as always, keep these 4 metrics that we talked about in mind. Ranking is, of course, important, but so is how you feel on campus, how connected you are, and what your student experience is like, because this is going to be the next 2, 4, or 6 years if you're going to go into graduate studies of your life. So you want to make sure that you're really happy and confident with that decision. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch this webinar. If you have any questions, of course, once again, you can put them in the chat and we'll be happy to answer. And if you haven't already, be sure to reach out to your agent, and we are excited to help you get started on your university studies. Thank you so much. Thanks, Laura.
Bye, everyone.